Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. It looks like we're live. I'm Molly Davis, WFDD's Assistant General Manager, and I'd like to welcome you to the third in our series of virtual community conversations. This one, Safeguarding Your Vote. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the vote this year. We're here to help. That's what this event is all about. We're so glad to have you here. We're doing these virtual community conversations to honor some of the hallmarks of public radio, including creating opportunities for lifelong learning, as well as spaces for civil discourse. And that's what we're doing today. We have an illustrious group of panelists with us. We're honored to have them here, as well as our great reporter, Paul Garber, who's going to lead this conversation. If you want to learn more about our virtual community conversations, you can find information on our website. That's WFDD.org. Scroll a little bit down the homepage and you'll find an orange banner, and that'll take you to a page where you can see our past conversations and visit there to find information about any upcoming conversations as well. If for any reason you can't stick around for the full conversation today, there will be a recording of this available on our YouTube channel, as well as that page on our website. And you can participate in the live chat right there on YouTube. So if you have questions or comments to add to the discussion, please feel free to enter them there. Thank you again for being with us today. And I'm going to turn everything over to Paul Garber. Thanks, Paul. Paul, you're muted.
Here we go. Thank you, Molly. It's understandable that people have concerns about this year's vote. The pandemic has changed the process for many as they seek out new ways to vote without exposing themselves to the virus. Protests that have erupted this summer have hardened the line between political groups and sometimes led to violence. We're headed to an election where we really just started getting the first votes in, and people, including the president, are calling the election rigged and raising questions about its validity. We all want to believe that the votes we cast will be counted in a timely way, and the choices that we made will be properly tabulated. That's why we're talking today about election security in 2020, what's changed, where you can get help, and how you can safeguard your vote in this turbulent, unpredictable year. I've got questions. I know you do too, and I'm so glad that our panel is here to help us. I want to introduce them now. Karen Brinson Bell is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Board of Elections. Thank you for joining us. Charlie Collicutt is the Director of Guilford County's elections. Tim Tsujii is Director of Forsyth County elections. And Anna Fesmire is co-president of the League of Women Voters of the Piedmont Triad, and she's been fighting for voting rights for many years now. Thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And Ms. Bell, I'm going to start with you. We've had more than 900,000 absentee ballot requests. And with that, I'm sure your office has probably received 900,000 questions at this point, if not more. The process is actually, though, pretty simple. Can you kind of walk us through it?
Absolutely. And I will even update everyone. We're over 1 million requests as of last night. So tremendous, unprecedented response. And so one of the real goals that we've had in 2016, we only had right around 200,000 ballots cast absentee by mail. So to know that we're up to 1 million people who are making that request, and we're expecting that we may have as many as 30 or 40% of our votes cast by mail, we've really tried to ensure that people understand that process, put tools into place to make that possible, while just doing the things that we do through any election to safeguard their vote. But specific to absentee by mail, we redesigned our absentee by mail envelope so that it would be more easily understood by voters. We worked with the Center for Civic Design, which helped us with the layout and conducted usability testing so that we would know that voters would have a better understanding of that, since it would, from so many, it would be their first time in this process. And then we were able to launch an online absentee by mail request portal so that people, would not have to leave the comfort of their home during this pandemic in order to request that absentee ballot. And then the county boards of elections are working tirelessly to process all of those. And as they do those steps, they are able to provide real-time tracking for the voters. Voters can sign up through the state board website or through county board websites for a service we call ballot tracks. And they can actually see where their vote is in the process, when it leaves the county board of elections, and if they choose to put it back into the mail stream as the delivery method to the county board of elections, they can follow it through the mail, much like these days we follow Amazon packages, or even how our pizza's coming along. So we've really just tried to make it as easy for voters as we possibly can if they choose that method, but we're also putting in a lot of safeguards, both cybersecurity and public safety, into the processes for in-person voting.
Okay, great. And so as far as the process goes, if I have a ballot filled out, I don't necessarily have to put it back in the mail, do I?
That's correct. So the voter makes the request for their absentee ballot. And once we receive that request, it's called a no excuse absentee ballot. And so we don't need to know why they want that. We simply fulfill that request. They'll receive a packet. It has considerable instruction to help them through that process. And they'll want to have a witness. That is a requirement in North Carolina, is to have a witness present to ensure that the voter is who they say they are, not so much to see how they mark their ballot. That's not the purpose of the witness. So we have the voter sign, the witness sign, and they complete their information. That gets sealed into an absentee by mail return envelope. And then that can either be mailed to the County Board of Elections, which needs to be done by 5 p.m. on election day, or postmarked by election day, so that we can consider it during the certification period if it's received after election day. And then if they want to drop it off in person, the voter or a near relative can do that. They can do that now at their County Board of Elections all the way through 5 p.m. on election day. Or once we start one-stop early voting, which is October 15th through 31st, they're able to drop off that ballot envelope and with the ballot inside to one of those sites.
And you bring up witnesses. Who is eligible to witness that?
Really, it's pretty wide open. It just needs to be someone who's 18 years of age. They don't have to be a North Carolinian. They don't have to be registered to vote in our state. It's more of who they can't be. They can't be the candidate unless the candidate is a near relative. They can't be an employee of one of the care facilities, if someone's in a nursing home, for example, or perhaps a hospital at that point in time. So, but otherwise, it really is pretty broad as to who can be a witness.
Okay, and then what's the process of counting them, and is that a public process?
Everything we do is pretty well public. The only limitations we have are the ability for people, when they do observe our processes, they can't interfere with our processes. So what will be public is that our county boards of elections, which are actually made up of 5-member boards. So I'll speak of staff responsibilities, but really, this process gets down to a lot of what the board members will do. And that 5-member bipartisan board will start having absentee board meetings next week on September the 29th, and they'll be presented by the staff with stacks of ballots to review. And they'll be looking for those signatures and whether they can approve them or not. And then they'll start, as long as they approve them, they'll start opening those envelopes and removing the ballot, inserting those into the voting machine or the tabulator. And we won't actually count them at that point. We wait for tabulation on election day. But by having this process in place, and that's what we call it, it's processing the absentee ballots. This allows us to be better prepared for election day, to go ahead and announce those results at the close of polls. At that same time, we'll tabulate the one-stop early voting results and announce those as well at the close of polls. And then we'll have probably a long night ahead of us as we wait for those election night returns from the precinct polling places. But we will, be very as speedy as we can, but the real intent will be to be as accurate as we can. And we anticipate a large turnout. So there's going to be a lot of ballot counting to do.
What happens if a ballot is rejected? What can lead to that? And what do voters need to be aware of as they put their ballots together that they don't get rejected?
So, really the most important thing is to complete the entire document. We've got areas marked for the signature. We've got areas where we ask for the witness information. And, as long as they provide that and get it back to us in a timely manner, as I spoke of, then we're in good position to count their ballot and have that be a smooth process. But what we can also do, and we have a court order that does pertain to this, is that we can help a voter to cure or to correct anything that they may have not completed properly or that may have missed. And so the voter will be notified. And this is good. Where we are with such a tremendous response, and where we are, being 40 days out from the election, is that it gives us an opportunity as election administrators to be in touch with those voters and to help them to get this right. And they'll be presented with a cure certificate so that they can rectify what may be missing from their ballot.
Okay, I'm going to follow up on that in a second, but historically, about how many absentee ballots are in fact rejected that never get cured?
I don't know the exact number, but it's very small. And where we are right now in terms of ones that we've identified that may have issue is very small as well. So what we need to do is just make sure that voters are aware and that we reach out to those individuals. We only have about 4 to 5% of North Carolinians who choose to vote absentee by mail. This year, we're thinking it's going to be, and we're tracking pretty close to this number, that we'll get to about 30, maybe even closer to 40% who will choose to cast their ballot through the absentee by mail process. And so what we know is we have a large population of people who are completely unfamiliar with this. And that's why, my county directors from Guilford and Forsyth County are on today. And why I wanted to do this is because it's another opportunity for us to educate folks. And we think that's really where, for what issues we're seeing, we think it's just a lack of familiarity. And even in what we saw in previous elections, we saw that there were some people who didn't, and we want every vote to count as, whenever possible. And so that was part of the reason why we even redesigned the envelope. We started that process before we even knew we had a pandemic. We started talking with the Center for Civic Design in February, and little did we know that we would be where we are today. But we're glad we took those steps, and we're glad that we're able to do so many other outreach efforts and inform voters through our judicial guide that started going out this past week to every household in North Carolina, and doing things like this.
Okay, and you were mentioning the cure process just a minute ago. That's new. I know that went through some mediation to get to where you are. But as you know, last night, 2 of the board members resigned. They are GOP members of the board. One of them is Ken Raymond, who's actually from Forsyth County, served on our local board here. They said they were misled about that process.
We issued a statement last night, and I think that's the most important thing that I can say. This is not part of our election administration. They obviously are the board that I work for, but we're focused in on administering this election. It's unfortunate that we've lost Mr. Raymond and Mr. Black. Both of them brought years of experience as county board members and such knowledge of the county processes that it's unfortunate they've chosen to resign. But we did issue in our statement that prior to every board meeting, board members are briefed by our civil servants, our public servants here who are attorneys, and there was counsel given by the litigation attorneys involved in these lawsuits. So if I could, I'd just like to leave it at that we did provide briefings to all board members, and that board meeting did last almost 3 hours in closed session with those attorneys.
Without getting into the specifics of why they left and your response to that, just talking about the process here, you've got 3 board members left. Is that a quorum? Is it a quorum, especially if there's only one, if there's no Republican side on that board? So the board now is 2 Democrats and unaffiliated, is that right?
No, sir. We have it's 5-member board. We went back to 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans make up the state board of elections. So we were with 3 Democrats currently. It's my understanding that the process, the way it works is that the Republican Party will put forth names to the governor, and he will select from that list of names and make appointments. And as far as I know, that process is already underway.
Okay. And what are we, 5 weeks out of the election? You're confident that the board is going to be functioning as it normally would by the time election day gets here, especially as it's likely to be contested?
As far as I know, we are on track. And we go through vacancies. Things happen. Our county board members, they've had reasons to have vacant seats. And we'll probably have that even before election day. And so, it's good that we have a process in place where the party officials know that they make the recommendations, and then we go through the process of filling, whether it's the state board or the county board, we fill those vacancies with members of the community, or in the state board case, representatives from across the state. So I'll look forward to working with whoever they put on the board, and and we'll just, it's all a part of the process, and to have good representation in our elections.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the statewide view of the absentee ballot issue. I do want to kind of go down to the local level, which is why we have Tim and Charlie here. And I'm going to let you guys kind of chime in here. What can people expect? They get the ballot at home. What can they expect in Forsyth and Guilford County? What do they need to know? Anything?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the number one thing is like Karen said, fill the whole thing out. Complete the entire form, sign it, get your witness to sign, get your witness to put their address down, get the witness to put their full address down, not just their street name, put the whole thing down, and get that witness to print their name. All those things, if they're filled out completely like that, then that ballot will get approved. If it's timely and and everything is on there. At that point, when it's in the process, I encourage voters to check ballot tracks. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. Sometimes can be a lag with the data, depending on when it was processed by the staff or the post office, or when ballot tracks may get the data. But overall, from a big picture, it's really nice, and I encourage voters to use it. And what they'll see is it follow the process through. And I think what a great thing that we do, and Karen touched on it, is this open meeting process, this transparent process where we deal with these ballots. I think it's important for any voter to know that throughout this process, you're relying on not only this professional staff, but you're relying on these appointed board members that are there to do a good job. And just know, from a security point of view, we've got great processes. Nothing is ever done with these ballots behind closed doors. Ballots are stored, ballots are sealed, and never opened up in the light of day unless you're in a public meeting with board members present. And I think that's important to note. And that's all 100 counties. And I just think it strengthens the process to know that everything done with this ballot, whether it's the state board with technology or what the county boards with their meetings, all open and all transparent.
All right, Tim?
And Paul, one thing I'll touch on is the returning of the absentee ballots. We are prepared to accept the absentee ballots that are returned to us in whichever method that the voter decides to return their ballots, whether it's in person here at the Board of Elections office, or if it's at the early voting sites, or through mail delivery. We are preparing for our one-stop workers to accept those ballots, where we'll have a help desk established or set up at each of the sites for those absentee voters to go directly to the help desk and to be able to drop off their ballots there. We have 2 drop-off stations already set up here at our front office to accept any walk-ins for voters that are already bringing in their absentee ballots.
Like drop boxes?
No, they're not drop boxes. It's just, we have staff that are stationed at tables in our front office to accept those ballots as voters are bringing those into us in person. Charlie touched on the transparency and the security aspect of these absentee board meetings. They are public, and I think that the rules are set up in such a fashion that actually promotes those safeguards and the transparency of the process. And so there's value to that. And we're gearing up for those absentee meetings to begin. And so we're going to start that next week, which is 5 weeks out. And we anticipate in being able to pre-process all of those absentee ballots that are returned up until that point, so that we'll be fully prepared to tabulate the results on election day and have those posted.
Okay. Karen, I believe you wanted to comment.
Yes. And, Tim and Charlie are just exceptional state directors, and all of the staff across the state are just doing a phenomenal job. They're all working extra hours each day and on the weekends at this point. And so I truly thank them for what they're doing and their leadership and their dedication. Since you touched on the question with Tim about drop boxes, I just thought it would be worth clarifying that North Carolina law does not permit us to do unmanned drop boxes in our state. So even with the provisions that the state board has been considering through some of these lawsuits and settlement, we still will not be doing unmanned drop boxes. Our state law does require us to identify if the person is the voter or their near relative. So that's why we'll continue to have those manned stations or staffed stations like Tim mentioned. Whenever if they do choose to drop it off in person, there will be someone there to collect the ballot from them and to acknowledge, or determine, from that voter, are they the voter or the near relative that's delivering that ballot?
Okay. I was wondering about that. So thank you for clearing that up. And Charlie, I think you had a follow-up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, from the local level, what we're seeing with the absentee ballots is unprecedented. Tim and I together have over 30 years of experience in elections. I know we look young, but we've been doing this for a long time, and this is a lot. This is changing. We are changing policies. We are changing procedures. We are changing staffing. Staff members' duties that have been doing things for 30 years are changing on the fly as we deal with this complete change of how we run elections locally. I know there's changes at the state board, but Tim and I are sitting there in our warehouses looking at 50,000 ballots that have gone out the door, and that's just in one county. So I think that it's important to note that we know what we're doing, and Karen says we're great, and that's great, and we appreciate that. But we're kind of starting from scratch with a lot of these processes that we're doing, and also another point, Tim mentioned running ballots through the tabulator, and I just wanted to point out, we're not looking at results now. We won't have results until election night. I won't have it internally. We just don't do it. We can't do it. But if we don't do this process along the way, if people say don't open ballots at all, well, we have to if you want election results on election night in these counties. So we are doing these preparatory steps, but no, we are not looking at results. And I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Anna, I wanted to give you a chance. We've heard from the directors, and I appreciate your comments very much. This is something that I'm sure y'all have had a lot of questions about at the League of Women Voters. And so I just wanted to see, kind of how you address these concerns and what you tell folks.
Well, what we give them is resources that they can consult in addition to the State Board of Election and the County Board of Elections. We have something that we call vote411.org. It is our league website that's national, state, and local. And what we do is we get committees together locally and create questions for candidates. We ask the candidates those questions, and then the candidates' responses are posted on vote411.org, or their absence of responses, which is also rather telling, I think, if you have just one candidate and the opponent doesn't respond. But we want voters to know what they're voting for, who they're voting for, and what the beliefs are of the candidates. So we're very strong on educating voters to know the candidates. We also distribute voter guides that have just come out. So we are working on trying to get the public up to speed to make informed votes when they vote. And I want to say that I've been to Charlie's Board of Elections, and we have a board member on our league who sits on the Board of Elections, and they are public meetings. They are open. There's no funny business going on. We show up, we in the league, and our members know that. They know that this is all open and above board, and that there is nothing to worry about, and that everybody just needs to keep calm and carry on and go vote.
This is something I have in my hands that I think is a root of some of the concern, and that is a absentee ballot request that I did not solicit. I didn't ask for it. It's the second one I've gotten. It showed up at my house. And I believe it's legal, but I want y'all to tell me kind of what your perspective on this, and what, can people go ahead and fill it out, or would you prefer they do it another way? Or what is your overall feeling about unsolicited ballot requests?
The state board put out a press release trying to help people know what's acceptable and what's not. These third-party mailings, and this is not, the one you held up is not the only organization that's providing absentee ballot request forms to voters through various mailings. Some of the parties have done so, some of the candidates have done so. As long as it complies with the state absentee request form, that it actually is the very document that we require and is not a modified document, then we are able to accept them. We did issue that statement because it is confusing for voters. They're getting a lot of mail. I've gotten more than you have, Paul. If you've just gotten 2, I can tell you there's a stack at my house that I've received. But but we are able to process those, and voter registration lists are public data. We don't maintain those lists for them, so they often will draw from other sources of information as well. And so it's unfortunate when their lists aren't as up to date as what is actually in our poll book and in our registration list. But, but we do hope that voters will utilize the options that are out there. I think the state board website and the county board website are the best sources because, they know for sure when they come to our websites that, we are those election officials and those election websites. And we did provide one of the absentee request forms in the judicial voter guide that went out to every household. So there are opportunities for voters, and just bear with us. We did not send out those mailings, but that's part of campaigning season. It seems like whether you're an advocate group or a candidate, we're all going to have a lot more mail in our mailboxes.
Okay. We did get a question from a listener who wants to know, we talked a lot about you getting witnesses and things, but as far as the process goes, once you have that ballot filled out, who can actually deliver it? Who can bring it to a site to either put in the mail, or to give it to a mailman, or to bring it down to one of y'all?
It's certainly permissible to put it into, your mailbox, or to drop it into the mail drop, at a post office or one of their standalone units. So that's not a problem. But in terms of returning it in person, it's intended that it be the voter or the near relative that would deliver in person to the County Board of Elections, or during that one-stop early voting period.
Okay. And so I know that y'all have been busy trying to get information out about how to do the absentees accurately and correctly and with a minimal amount of rejection. But there's been a lot of talk about the ballots, especially from the president, who's referred to absentee voting as rigged, although he's done it himself. He's recently called them a disaster. When asked about a turnover of a peaceful turnover of power should he lose, his comment was, get rid of the ballots and there won't be a turnover, there will be a continuation. I mean, that's got to make your job harder in terms of getting out information. I mean, he's told people to vote twice in North Carolina, specifically speaking to North Carolina voters, to vote twice, once with absentee and then to check up on it by voting again. So that's got to make the job of getting accurate information out that much more difficult.
You're asking them to commit a felony if you ask them to vote twice. We tell people you can't vote twice. It's not legal.
Okay, and I think the Attorney General came out and said the same thing among other people. But would ask you, Ms. Bell, what do you respond with when comments like that come out about the election of specifically through the absentee not being accurate or not being trustworthy, essentially?
We did come out with a statement making it very clear that double voting is not allowed in North Carolina, but we actually saw it as an opportunity. As we've been talking about, this is a new method of voting for so many voters, even though it's been something we've had in place for decades now. So we really did see it as an opportunity to make sure that people could hear how it works. And what's really clear, and Tim and Charlie can speak to this, is that our system is set up that once we receive that ballot and the person has voted it, then they're going to go in our system as having voted. And so if they show up in person during the early voting period or on election day and try to check in, we're going to have it in our system that their ballot has already been cast. The same thing happens if they choose to vote in person during that 17-day early voting period. And then if they show up on election day, we're going to have that in our system when they check in as well. If there's any discrepancy in that, a voter's offered a provisional ballot where we can research to see if there was anything abnormal taking place. But, several things were said along the way. I mean, we don't want people to double vote. We have mechanisms in there to check that, but we also want people to know that they don't have to go and show up in person to know that their ballot has been received and counted. We have those tools online now. And while I don't want to, overwhelm the County Board of Elections with any more phone calls, they will answer that phone and give that answer to that voter if they're not able to use the online tools and the tracking tool. But, it's really important that people understand that. And furthermore, if someone did want to vote absentee and then change their mind, or it's pushing election day and they haven't put that back in the mail, they can, as long as they haven't marked that ballot and sent it back to the County Board of Elections, then they can go and vote in person. Requesting and receiving the ballot do not mean that you've voted. It's actually marking that ballot and returning it and us receiving it that makes it a voted ballot. So no one is double voting if they show up in person just because they requested an absentee ballot.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you made that point, and I assume you just assume them tear that ballot up once they make the decision to go vote in person.
Yes, that would be a very good practice. Discard that ballot.
Charlie, I think you had a point that you wanted to make.
Yeah, sorry. You talked about about the information aspect of this. How do we counter misinformation? Because I think Karen just explained really well that we do have a very tight system here in North Carolina to make sure that double ballots aren't coming in, those issues. Tim and I have an informational way of dealing with things that Karen doesn't have in her scope of her job. Tim and I probably talk to people all the time on the phone. Every day we talk to people. We talk to people that are angry about the process. We talk to people that are concerned about the process. We talk to groups. We talk to local news that sometimes are more influential on people's lives than the national news cycle. We talk to the alternative weekly papers. So Tim and I are able to actually have one-on-one talks with angry voters, and sometimes that helps because you don't know who when you talk to somebody, then they disseminate that information to their family and friends, and so at the local level, I think we don't have the resources that Karen does to get these large scale statements out or hit this more national news cycle, but I think we do a pretty good job locally, even if it's a more individualized point of contact.
I'm curious to know when you and Tim hear from voters, what is their biggest concern right now? What are you hearing the most about from our local voters?
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so primarily, from our absentee voters, they're checking on the status of their ballot. And so that's pretty much a great majority of the calls that we're getting. We're also getting calls about how folks will be able to vote in person safely out at the polling places, whether it's during early voting or on election day. Okay. So those have been the majority of the calls that we've been receiving.
Okay. Same for you, Charlie, or is there a difference there?
That's the majority of the calls is questions. But when we do get those people that are concerned not about their own specific ballot, I think we can handle that. It's people that are concerned about the process, people that are concerned about Guilford County or North Carolina in general. And it's just kind of this generic it's rigged, or it's generic ballot. You're just going to be taking ballots in and double ballots, and that somebody out there is just going to be flooding us with ballots. And so I can go through some of the things that Karen talked about with voters individually, and usually that works once they realize that we didn't just flood the county with ballots, and that so we're not going to get flooded back with ballots. And I'll get into some of the technology about you can't just photocopy a ballot, that's just not going to work. But usually that works when we talk to people. But again, like Tim said, the majority of the calls are voters worried about themselves, and we can clear them up.
Okay.
Paul, one other thing that I want to share in terms of the checks and balances and the processes that we have in place at the local level with regarding to double voting. We do conduct an extensive and thorough post-election audit process where after each election, we're checking the voter history and we're checking the ballots that have been cast. We're checking those against each other to detect if someone's tried to or attempted to vote more than once. And so we're looking for those types of things. We do a thorough audit and reconciliation process after the election to be looking for possible and potential double voting.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you. I did want to touch on some other issues in addition to the absentee ballot, which we've discussed for a while now. I wanted to pivot to something else, and that is intimidation at the polls, because we've had some in the last couple election cycles where there have been people who've showed up and there were voters who came to vote and they were concerned, they felt intimidated, they didn't know what those people were there for. They seemed to be loud and disruptive. And so I'm wondering, how do you keep voters safe when they show up to vote in person? And what are the rules for people who are not there to vote, but maybe even out of the precinct, but are there because they know certain people are going to be voting at that precinct? What are the rules, and what can be done to minimize the risk of voter intimidation?
I'm happy to let Tim and Charlie speak about specific things they do within their county, but as a whole, we have a very defined buffer zone and electioneering, where you cannot cross into the buffer zone for anything other than the purpose of coming into the voting enclosure to cast your ballot. So outside of that is the electioneering area. And we have to be mindful of, we do not want voters to feel intimidated, but we also have that freedom to campaign and to have electioneering and freedom of speech. And so it's a very fine line that we have to walk, but we do provide information to the political parties so that they're aware of what's permitted. We provide that information to the counties and on our state website so that there's a clear understanding of what's permitted. And then, probably the best thing is that, those bipartisan officials who have signed up to be election workers at those polling places, they monitor what's taking place, and they're the ones who are able to determine and call in, support if there is a problem that takes place at the polling place. And while we may, we're mindful of what could take place during this election, when you realize that 30 to 40% of our ballots may be cast by mail, that reduces the number of people going in person to vote. And so we're hopeful that actually means that, this will be less of an issue than we've, had some concern about.
In the primary, you set up something where people could report directly to the State Board of Elections if they witness something like that. Are you going to do that again in the fall?
Yes, that'll still be in place. That's been in place for some time. And certainly, if there is something taking place that we need to be aware of, we have an investigations division at our State Board of Elections. We also work closely with the Department of Public Safety and state emergency management officials if things got to that level. But fortunately, we don't see that happening, and we're hopeful that will remain the case.
Okay.
Paul, there are nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations like Democracy North Carolina, because I have been a poll monitor for them on several occasions in the past, and they report to 888 Our Vote if there is anything that needs to be reported and can help voters that feel like something questionable is happening. So there are good nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations that also monitor elections.
Have you seen anything untoward that you felt warranted reporting?
In the past, when I have done this, I think there have been 2 instances in which voters filled out a report form because something happened inside. They had some kind of disagreement. They thought that they were told something that wasn't correct, but that was just out of, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who came by over a period of time. So it was very minimal, and I put them in touch with the hotline. They called, and whatever their concern was taken care of right away.
Okay.
It was not a serious issue at
Okay.
the polls where I was working.
Okay, good. I mean, I do worry somewhat that because things have become so inflamed after the protests and counter protests of the summer, that people just want to take that fight even further into the precincts. But that doesn't seem to be a particular worry of yours any more than a typical election year. It sounds like.
Well, I don't like to anticipate trouble. I don't want to trouble, but it hasn't been a problem in the past. So I am hoping that things will be as civil and sensible as they have been.
Okay.
In our area, things are good. I can't say what's happening in other parts of the state, but that are not as closely monitored as the states as the parts of the state that have larger populations.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And we did have a question from a listener asking, are open carry laws any different during an election than they are essentially for the rest of the year?
That's a much more technical question than we usually get. But the reality is that I'd say vast majority of our polling places actually have signs that explain what the policy is of that facility, that building, with regards to guns and whether they're prohibited. So if the facility, if it's clear that that's a facility that does not allow for guns, as many public government buildings are, and those are often our polling places, then the voters do have to, or anyone would have to adhere to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. The bipartisan Senate report would indicate that Russia tried to interfere in the last election and is likely to do it again, along with possible other actors, including China. And I just wanted to ask you, about cybersecurity. Are any of North Carolina's election day voting machines connected to the internet?
Did you
Well, I
want me
can
to
speak for
answer that?
Forsyth County.
Yeah, there
Ours
you
is
go.
not. In fact, speaking of voting machines, we're actually in the process of conducting our pre-election testing, also known as the logic and accuracy test, where we take all of our voting systems to be used in this upcoming election and do a simulated election where we use test ballots that have predetermined vote patterns, and we go through the process of ensuring that all of our voting machines that we plan to use will be ready and prepared for use and be prepared for accuracy as well in the upcoming election. And so I can assure you that the voting equipment that we use here in Forsyth County, they are not networked and cannot be connected to the internet. In fact, as part of the procurement process, we have to go through an extensive statewide certification program before we can even purchase these voting machines, and there are requirements with regards to networking and internet accessibility.
Okay.
Yeah, by state law, no county can have their voting equipment connected to the internet. So be it the actual voting unit, the tabulator that's used, or the computer system that the counties use to aggregate and tabulate results, those are not connected to the internet. When they do transfer the election results, over to the website. That's done on a computer separate from the voting system. And it's used on clean new media when they make those transfers, so that it's still a completely disconnected process. And Tim mentioned the logic and accuracy testing. There are actually in some elections more test votes cast than there are actual votes cast, because our testing is that extensive. Every ballot style, every ballot position, every choice on a ballot is tested with a unique vote script or test script. So there's a unique vote total, and every single unit that's deployed for voting, including our spares, are tested during that period. And that's just what we do for every election. But as Tim mentioned, we have a very extensive certification process that adheres to federal standards as well as state standards. Our equipment, before it was certified by the State Board of Elections, went through extensive testing by an independent lab. There were demonstrations before the state board, and every county, before they procure a system, has to, the board members have to have seen a demo. They have to go through a test election with the voting equipment or a simulated election before they can purchase. So it's quite an extensive process, and we're pretty proud of what we've done. We have other safeguards in place. We have cybersecurity advisors that work with us at the state and national level. So not only are we monitoring our voting equipment, we're monitoring our entire system, be it the laptops that are used for check-in or the voter registration database that we have within our state. We have sensors, we have proactive efforts to make sure that we are safe, and we're monitoring that on a daily, I should say even hourly, minute by minute basis, but that is being done. And we have been able to protect, we've had no cases where we have found any hacking into our system. We have not been hacked in North Carolina, and it's a lot because of the efforts that the counties go through and the efforts that we've put in place here at the state level through our cybersecurity efforts.
I think it's also important to note the physical security aspects that go along with the cybersecurity elements to the voting systems. Here in Forsyth County, we have cameras and keypad locks for every single room that we utilize. Again, the room that we use for the vote tabulation process, it's in a secured environment that's not capable of any networking or internet connectivity, if you will. And so the physical aspect or the physical security aspect is also important and crucial to the cybersecurity element to our voting systems.
Okay. Charlie?
Yeah, I think it's important to note too, going along with what Tim said, is that you have 100 counties doing their own election with their own equipment. There's a lot of standards. Nobody's networked, nobody's on the internet. And I feel very confident in that. But at the same time, all 100 counties are housing the vote totals for their county in rooms, just like Tim said, all across this state. So there's really, when you think about it, there's 100 sets of data that are the elections in North Carolina. And the state board aggregates that data. But that's not the true result at this time, early on. That is aggregated data that comes from the certified results of the state, then gets aggregated and certified by the State Board of Elections. So, you think about that, if some intrusion were to happen, the whole state's not affected. The whole state's not wiped out. We are all separate entities when it comes to the way that we pull our results together. And then I want to also point out that there's a lot to be careful of. Karen just touched on it. I think sometimes the focus gets lost on just the voting systems, the voting machines. But the thing that's so integral to how we can even conduct an election is the voter registration database. The millions of voters that are registered in the state. Where do they go vote? What's their address? What's their party? So when they go vote, they're in the right place, and we can do that. If that was compromised, we'd have a major issue. And I know that Karen's team has done excellent. They've used a lot of federal resources to shore this up. On the county side, we've all got great IT departments that are very aware of what they need to do. But what's really neat about the system is how much built-in redundancy there is as far as this database in case it was ever compromised. we would be okay. We really would. And so I just want to make sure that when you talk about hacking and all that, it's so easy to say, oh, the voting machines are not connected to the internet, but there's a lot to it. There really is. And I feel very confident to be in this state.
And Paul, I'll add to the redundancy that Charlie just mentioned. I failed to mention that now all 100 counties have a paper ballot system. We have a paper backup for every single ballot that's cast, whether the voter marked it with a pen to that paper, or if they used a machine to help them in making their mark, that's then inserted to the tabulator. There is a paper record that we can actually do a hand-to-eye count. And we do that as part of the audits that Tim mentioned. Following every election, we've done this since 2006. We have a sample hand-to-eye audit following every election. It's a randomly generated selection, and the counties conduct that with bipartisan teams who sit and truly verify that the count on the machine is the count that we have on that paper.
Okay. We've got about 10 minutes left. I do want to get to some of our listeners' questions, but following up on that right quick, both Guilford and Forsyth, both are your barcode paper ballots? Or do they print out a barcode?
I think what you may be referring to is the express vote ballot marking device.
Yes.
Yeah. So the primary voting system here in Forsyth County is hand-marked paper ballots for both early voting and on election day. The express vote ballot marking device is essentially used as our ADA accessibility voting device that we're federally required to have at every single polling place. That's just one type of the ADA accessibility device that's available for use here in the state. And that is the one device that our county decided to purchase for use for our ADA component.
Okay.
All right. And we're all completely hand-marked paper ballot. And what we do use for ADA is a different system than the express vote. It does not produce a barcode, but it's an older and very old and more cumbersome system than the express vote that Tim uses.
Okay.
And I will add, Paul, so even with the barcode on the paper ballot, it does print out the voter's actual selection with the candidate's name of their selection on the paper ballot. In fact, there's safeguards in place where you could even take that printed paper ballot that's printed from one express vote and even feed it back into a different express vote to verify the validity of the selections. But then keep in mind, just to echo what Karen was talking about earlier, we do have a post-election audit process in place where we would do a sample hand-to-eye recount on those ballots as well to verify those votes.
Okay, I think that the main concern about barcodes is whether or not, if I cast a vote, how can I double check my vote? And if it's a hand-marked paper ballot, that's not really an issue. Or is it? It wouldn't seem to be.
Well, like I said, the express vote paper ballot would also print out the voter's selection as well. And so they can verify that printout on that ballot.
And no matter which type of ballot's used, it's inserted into a tabulator that's actually counting, or determining how the voter cast their ballot. So that's why we do the logic and accuracy testing that we do, and we do the post-election audit, is to ensure that tabulator was able to determine whatever the voter's intent was on either type of ballot, whether it was through the ballot marking device or through the hand marking. It's all relying on that tabulator performing properly, and that's why we do the verifications that we do.
Okay. And I think you were going to make a point a minute ago. Were you trying to chime in there on this issue?
Are you saying me?
Yes. On the machine.
No, I think that they have been extremely careful. And I think that I have no reason to think that there's anything that's going to go wrong with this way. I saw when they were selecting the machines, we had an opportunity to see what the Board of Elections was looking at as far as the different companies and the different sorts of machines. So I think that everything that I have heard from friends who have already done their voting and have started into the early voting process, everything seems to be going smoothly. So I have great confidence that it's all going to go well. And these are the busiest and most hardworking public servants around, I'll tell you. They deserve a round of applause from all citizens. And what I would say to voters is make a plan. Take pity on our hardworking officials who are working for the Board of Elections. Don't make their lives any harder than they already are. So make a plan. Decide, are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to vote in person? You're going to go to early voting? Are you going to wait for Election Day? No. Plan it and make everybody's life a little bit easier. And it's all going to come out right.
Okay, great.
It's going to be fine.
Let me hit some of these questions because we've only got 5 minutes, and I could talk to y'all for hours. It's really going great, and I've learned a ton, and I appreciate your time so much. I'm going to paraphrase some of these just for time. We did get a question how to get a copy of the league's voter guide. How can they get a copy of that?
It's not our voter guide. It is put together by Democracy North Carolina and Common Cause. And there is, I think I have a link to an online version, but if that is a person in Greensboro, I will bring them one if they'll give me their address and let me know where they are.
Okay, sounds good. We did get a question if somebody didn't fill out their ballot completely, maybe they had a race they didn't know about. It's talking absentee. I know you can do that in person if you just don't know or you care to make a protest by not voting for anybody. If they do that with the absentee ballot, is it still going to count if it's not filled out completely in terms of who they vote for? I assume that's...
When we were talking about filling it out completely, we were meaning the envelope that the ballots were turned in. If someone wants to vote a blank ballot in North Carolina, that is absolutely their option. Or if there's contests they don't want to complete, that's still their option, no matter which voting method. And that's actually part of what we test for when we do all that logic and accuracy testing. So the part we were trying to highlight is that the absentee by mail process the envelope has a form on it, basically. So they'll do what they want to with their ballot, fold it and put it into that envelope, and then complete the steps that are outlined on that envelope.
Okay, we also got a question, is the absentee ballot exactly the same as the one that you would complete if you went to the polls? Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm gonna give y'all 30 seconds each. I wanna hear the best advice you have to give people confidence that this 2020 election is going to be successful and accurate and reflect the will of the people. And I'm actually going to start with you, Charlie. And I'm going to go to Tim, then Anna, then Karen. Okay, so Charlie, if you go first.
Yeah, I think the best thing to know is that we're people. We're human beings. We're North Carolinians. We live in your community. We're working hard. Us, our staff, we are working hard. This is a true statement that we don't even know who wins these races at the end of the night. Sometimes we're so tired when we go home. We are hardworking civil servants. We are hardworking bureaucrats, and we're just trying to do the right thing. And it's not the easiest process in the world, but we are trying to do right by you, other North Carolinians.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, so just to echo Charlie's sentiments, I fully believe that we are all committed to helping serve all eligible voters during these difficult times. We understand the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're going to do everything we can to ensure that every eligible voter is going to be able to cast their ballot safely in this upcoming election. There's various things that are already in place, whether it's absentee by mail voting. We also have our multi-partisan assistance teams that can be deployed to assist voters at medical facilities, nursing homes, et cetera. We're going to do everything we can to not only keep the voters safe, but our poll workers safe out at these polling places, whether it's through implementation of social distancing and having increased sanitation in the voting enclosures and providing PPE and disposable styluses and pens. We're going to take all the drastic measures so that we can ensure that the voters can feel confident and encouraged with the voting process that we have in place for November.
Anna?
I am with one of the nonpartisan organizations that promotes this kind of civic engagement. We go to the Board of Elections meetings. We look into every aspect of voting. We know the people who are with the Board of Elections, and we have members who work the polls. And so we see it up close and personal, and that's why I have every confidence that in our area, everything is going to be just fine, absolutely on the up and up, and nobody needs to worry about funny business around here. It's all going to be done very, very carefully.
Ms. Bell, I'm actually going to ask you a different question, and that is, I have spoken to a candidate who believes the outcome of his election won't be known until as late as Christmas. And so can you just tell us what the post-election day scenario looks like to you? How do you keep people kind of calm as we kind of go through the counting process and possibly legal action as well?
So actually, North Carolina is uniquely positioned. Other states are struggling because they've not had some of the laws in effect that we have. But when we were talking about the ability to process those absentee by mail ballots during our absentee board meetings that start next week, that means that we get to start doing those preparatory steps, as Charlie and Tim both alluded to. We will have the ability to turn that voting machine that has our absentee ballots in it to tabulate on election day, and then report those results at 7:30 p.m. So if 30% of our votes are cast that way, and we're able to announce those at 7:30 p.m., and then if we have, possibly 50% participate in-person early voting during October 15th through 30th, or 31st, and we tabulate those on election day and release those at 7:30, then that could very well be 80% of our ballots cast. And if it's a wide margin, that's when the media and others can go ahead and call those races, even though they're still technically unofficial. And so those close races, what they're going to depend on are those results that we get back from the precincts on election night. And those will start coming in, hopefully 9:30, but we'll probably have a late night. It's going to be a big election. So at that point, those are unofficial results, and we'll have the culmination of those, and then it'll be during our 10-day certification period. That's what we've had on the books for some time now in North Carolina. That's when the county boards will be accepting those absentee ballots that were postmarked on election day or received by 5 p.m. on election day. We'll go through those and the provisionals. And so, in that period of time, we should be able to declare and have those official results by November 13th, much like we've done in all the elections past.
Great. I would love to go on, but we are out of time. Thank you so much. It's been really informative. I think our electorate's going to get a lot out of hearing from y'all. And so thank you so much. And let me know if you have any follow-up questions or things you want to let me know. I'm happy to hear from you. And again, thank you again for all of your participation and your time in this. I know there's huge burdens on your time right now, and it means a lot to us that you take your time to speak to our voters. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.